This afternoon, we welcome again Jeffrey Smith to address the topic of genetic modification of food. After his presentation this morning, I think you'll agree that Mr. Smith is very articulate, passionate, and informed as an advocate for the position that GMO foods represent a serious health risk. This morning, he presented information arguing that GMOs are unsafe and should be of concern to each of us. And by the show of hands that he conducted, many of you seem to be persuaded. Now he's going to try to address what actions can be taken in light of that concern, and he's going to invite your participation. Please welcome Mr. Smith.
Okay, I'm looking forward to this session. This is a session that is close to my heart because I am involved with outreach and activism and education, and this is a session about outreach, activism, and education. First of all, I want to get a show of hands again. How many people, you all made a show of hands at the end of this morning's talk about how vigilant you decided you'll be next week, and you raised your hand. How many people kept the same level since then? How many people have dropped off since lunch? All right. Just wanted to know if it was really a turning point in your digestive life or not. So the people in the back had a chance to see the whole audience and to see the show of hands. So I will tell you, for those sitting in the front, that most everyone had shifted to the 80 to 100 category. Now this is a significant thing. Can you hear me? Raise your hand if you can't hear me. Just kidding. It's a significant thing because many of you made changes in your diet in 60 minutes. Actually, it was 40 minutes. Now, this actually provides us with confidence in the strategy that I'm about to describe. Now, I want to first share with you what already has happened. And I alluded to it this morning. But I want to give you a perspective of what happened in Europe, starting with the projections by the biotech industry and what their intentions have been for the food company, for the food supply. In late January of 1999, a representative from Arthur Andersen, a company that was Monsanto's consultant, gave a presentation saying that they had asked Monsanto executives to describe their ideal future in 15 to 20 years. And the executives described a world in which 100% of all commercial seeds were genetically engineered and patented. That Andersen worked backwards from that goal to create the strategy and tactics to achieve it. At the same conference, another company circulated a paper projecting a 95% takeover of all commercial seeds within 5 years, by 2004. My friend who was at the conference said he had never in his life heard statements more arrogant than these. These companies were planning to replace nature, and very quickly. But what happened 3 weeks later was that the gag order on Dr. Pustai was lifted. Looks like we have no control over the PowerPoint. So we will not be using a PowerPoint today. Never mind. 3 weeks later, the gag order on Dr. Pustai was lifted. He's the one that had the potatoes. And within a week, 159 column feet of articles were written. Within a month, 750 articles. After just the first week, one editor said it divided society into two warring blocks. Now, it was this high-profile food safety coverage by the media that alerted the European consumers about the dangers of GMOs and In the last week in April, Unilever, Britain's largest food manufacturer, publicly committed to stop using GM ingredients in its European brands. By the end of the week, so did virtually everyone else. It was a landslide. GMOs, which offer no consumer benefits, had become a pure marketing liability. Someone is controlling these from the other room. So whoever's controlling them from the other room, just play whatever you want. I'll work around you. Let's see. Yes. Okay, it works. So what we have seen there, from January, third week in January, the biotech industry plans to replace nature, 95% takeover in 5 years. 3 weeks later, their plans crash, completely blindsided them, and Europe, within 2.5 months, is basically committing to be GM-free. It was not the government that banned the GMOs from Europe. It was Nestle's and Burger King and McDonald's and Unilever. The same companies that continue to sell GMOs in the United States. Now, we've seen a tipping point in the United States with bovine growth hormone. How many people have heard of that, bovine growth hormone? It's injected into cows to increase milk supply. I talked to a former Monsanto scientist who Monsanto used to sell bovine growth hormone. He said 3 of his colleagues were testing the safety of milk from cows injected with genetically modified bovine growth hormone. And they saw a hormone in the milk called IGF-1, insulin-like growth factor 1, which is linked to cancer. And these 3 scientists decided from that point on to not drink milk again unless it was organic, and therefore from cows that were never injected. So Monsanto's own scientists refused to drink Monsanto's own products, the milk from cows treated with their drug. We've been educating consumers about the health dangers of the milk, the IGF-1, the increased bovine growth hormone, the increased pus, the increased antibiotics. And we have seen a tipping point of consumer rejection there as well. I'm trying to find it. It is there. A tipping point of consumer rejection against the bovine growth hormone. It's been kicked out of Walmart, Starbucks, Yoplait, Dannon, most of America's dairies. But that has taken a few years. It was not the high-profile media coverage that we saw in Europe. It was a slow transition for the health-conscious shoppers informing parents concerned about children. Bovine growth hormone was kicked out. So we are planning to create a tipping point now with genetically modified crops by providing people with shopping guides so they can choose non-GMO products. We have a shopping guide online, and we plan to create the tipping point through our campaign for healthier eating in America. Now I want to share with you what that means in terms of how you may wish to get involved. Now, before I do, I want to share with you the history of GMOs in the United States, in that every single administration, from the first Bush administration, Clinton, all of them, Republican or Democrat, have been in favor of GMOs and working to push GMOs onto the rest of the world. Dane Glickman, the former Secretary of Agriculture, admitted, he said, what I saw generically from the pro-biotech side was the attitude that the technology was good and that it was almost immoral to say that it wasn't good because it was going to solve the problems of the human race and feed the hungry and clothe the naked. And if you're against it, you're Luddites, you're stupid. He said, you felt like you were disloyal and alien by trying to present an open-minded view. He worked in the Clinton administration. And when he ad-libbed at one of his speeches and questioned some of the aspects of GMOs, he said he feared for his job. He said he was slapped around by the administration and by industry. We were hoping that the Obama administration would be more enlightened on GMOs. He had promised to label GMOs if he was elected. He didn't. Instead, he put in a lot of pro-GM experts or pro-GM advocates in key positions in the USDA, in the U.S. Trade Organization, in USAID, and the FDA. And so that is one reason why the strategy that we've taken is not to change government policy. It's to change the food supply by consumers at the top of the food chain. Now, how many people would it take to avoid eating genetically modified foods in order to create a change in the marketplace? Is it a vote? Do we need 51%? Do we need Kraft Foods marketing executive to say, well, we've lost 50% of market share, I think we should get rid of the GM corn? No. Kraft and all of these other major food companies have already eliminated GMOs from their European products, from their Japanese products. They are watching carefully to see if anti-GMO sentiment gets traction in the US. We think as little as 5%, 15 million consumers in America, consciously avoiding brands that contain GM ingredients would be more than enough to create the tipping point of consumer rejection. And I have to say, we're on track. In 2009, GMO-free was the fastest store brand label, fastest growing store brand label in the United States. Last year, it was the fourth fastest overall health label in the United States. Supermarket News at the end of 2009 predicted that 2010 would see an unprecedented upsurge of consumer awareness and concern about GMOs, and they were right. I've been crisscrossing the United States since 2003, speaking on GMOs. And at the first half of last year, I saw more informed, enthusiastic consumers reaching out and telling others about GMOs than I had ever seen. It was unprecedented. Then in the second half of the year, we saw the unprecedented news coverage on the potential approval for genetically engineered salmon, the sugar beet court case, the alfalfa court case, the recent approval of both by the USDA. So the media has actually raised the specter and concern of consumers even more. And also Dr. Oz did a 15-minute segment on GMOs in December. And I was on there along with Dr. Michael Hansen and another doctor. How many people saw the Dr. Oz show? So that was the highest profile coverage of GMO health risks by entertainment media in the United States for broadcast TV. So we're seeing a change in the consciousness in the United States. So who do we approach? If we need 5% of the population to avoid eating GMOs, who do we talk to? Well, health-conscious shoppers themselves are more than enough. There's 28 million Americans that buy organic on a regular basis, 54 million on an irregular basis. These people make choices about what to eat based on what they consider to be healthy. And so if you ask these folks, would you eat a GMO if you had the choice, nearly everyone would say no. In fact, most Americans say they would avoid GMOs if labeled, 53%. So we actually have the majority of Americans willing to avoid GMOs. But if 9 out of 10 of those were lying, and it was only 5%, that's still enough. So the plan that we have devised is to take information that's compelling and to bring it to people who are receptive. So we have 3 messages. the health dangers, the shopping guide, how to avoid GMOs, and the tipping point, how a small percentage can eliminate GMOs. And that helps the message go viral. The health dangers are presented in a variety of ways. We have the Right Brain book called Seeds of Deception, which is the stories of the scientists like Dr. Pustai who were fired and the takeover of the FDA. And for those of you who would like to be participating in outreach using these educational materials, as I pick them up, I'm going to share with you the strategy as to why we created it and how you may want to use it. This was created because other GM books were boring, and GMO was not a particularly popular topic in the United States. But there was some fantastic material, like how a UC Berkeley professor told me that a senior government official from Mexico tried to threaten him to not publish evidence about contamination of GMOs in Mexico, even implying we know where your children go to school, trying to get him not to publish. Or how 2 Fox TV reporters were going to do a 4-part news series on bovine growth hormone until a threatening letter from Monsanto's attorney promising dire consequences to Fox and Rupert Murdoch ultimately canceled the series. How the deadly epidemic from tryptophan, the origins, the genetic engineering origins were hidden from Congress by the spokesperson at the FDA during testimony. So this is the book of stories, and woven into those stories is information about the health dangers. So this is a strategy for people who like to read stories. And if you're going to use this as part of your lending library, then what you do is you say, just read the first chapter. That's about Dr. Arpad Pustai. And it keeps people gripped. It explains the big microcosm of what happens with GMOs, the rigged research, the attack on him and all that, and what can go wrong. So that's for the people that like to read stories. And as I was traveling around with that book around the world, giving it to politicians, I realized they'll never read that many pages. They're too busy. They only have the attention span for like a brochure or a 1-page memo. But I also had information that I wanted to convey to the scientific staff members and to medical practitioners. And they needed detailed text. So I decided to prepare this book called Genetic Roulette to appeal to both. It has a 2-page spread format. The left side, the executive summary, is for the attention deficit politician. And the right side is the detailed cited text for their staff and medical personnel, etc. So the way you deal with this is for the left brain decision maker. And it's intimidating, right? It's a heavy book. It looks like a textbook. So if they don't read it, you hit them. Well, what you do is you open it in front of them and you say, see, you just have to read the left side. And the top here is the complete 1-sentence summary. And then there's bullet points and a quote from a scientist. So they've read the 1 sentence, and then you flip the page quickly. And you say, see, you only have to read the 1 sentence. And then you flip the page quickly. And you see, and then you can go over here if you want, and then you flip it, and then they grab it out of your hand. Because they want to finish the sentence and they want to get what it says. And so the only way to deal with this book is to open it and show people. Because it's too intimidating for them to open it themselves. No one wants to read a textbook. But it's written and it describes right across from the table of contents how you can read it as a quick scan, a casual read, or an in-depth study. So this has opened the doors to all sorts of medical conferences and medical organizations evaluating GMOs at a glance, some coming out with policies against GMOs, etc. Whenever you loan a book, we always ask the question, so when will I have it back? And that will, then whatever they say, you repeat. And I'm giving you some tips for outreach, because we're about to tell you how we can organize ourselves for outreach. more effectively. But if they know that they have to get it back by a certain date, the chances are much higher that they'll actually read it. So getting back to strategy, health-conscious shoppers are a primary. Now I have two of these. I have no idea which one's which. Okay. For health-conscious shoppers, we have non-GMO education centers. These 6-foot-high shippers with books and DVDs and shopping guides and health risk brochures. They are distributed through United Natural Foods here in the West. You can get them directly from our institute headquarters. And so we are going to the locations where health-conscious shoppers buy stuff. Also, it's used in doctors' offices. Medical organizations and medical doctors are another key targeted demographic for our campaign for healthier eating in America. And so we are now bringing information to medical conferences. I'm speaking for the second time at the Naturopathic Conference this year, and for the 5th time at the American Academy for Environmental Medicine, and the 2nd time at the American College for the Advancement of Medicine. And so we're getting the word out, and doctors each represent between 1,000 and 2,000 patients. And we have I speak at nutritionist conferences, etc. So this is a key demographic outreach. For those of you who are involved with the healthcare profession, I strongly encourage you to get patient education materials, which are primarily the shopping guide and the health risk brochure. And some people also sell audio CDs. We just got audio CDs right before this talk. We sell them for $1. You can make as many copies of them as you want. We could buy them off our website for $1. We have this, everything you have to know about dangerous genetically modified foods. We sell them for $3 each in bundles of 100. You can make as many copies of these as you want. This is available for free online. So is the audio. So is the shopping guide. We try and make things available inexpensively in a lot of formats so it can go out to as many people as possible. So we have health professionals now prescribing non-GMO diets, and I must say with a lot of success. I've been videotaping interviews with the doctors and their patients, and it's remarkable. Religious and spiritual groups is another outreach focus, because there many organizations have a spiritual or religious preference for non-GMO foods. Some people say that GMO for those organizations means God move over instead of genetically modified organism. So there we've actually presented at the Seventh-day Adventist spiritual camp in the East Coast, and I was on their national internet broadcast, and they made DVDs and started a GM-free church campaign. So we've been involved with other spiritual and religious groups, bringing the information, and it's a very receptive, warm audience there. Now, for the general population, we have more access now than ever before through Facebook and YouTube. So we're developing materials. So what we've done is on our website at responsibletechnology.org is we have a sign-up page for what we've now inaugurated as the Non-GMO Tipping Point Network, where you get to fill out a profile of how you would like to do outreach, whether it's to health-conscious shoppers, healthcare professionals, spiritual and religious groups, schools, chefs and restaurants, youth, inner city, indigenous groups, etc. And whether you want to do outreach in your own community, and whether you want to be a leader among groups, local or national. Then you can join in with others with similar interests. You could join in, for example, we're starting 25 non-GMO action groups this month based on more than 1,000 people who've come to our site and signed up to be part of this Tipping Point Network. And we basically start a group when we have a leader in a local area. Once we have a leader, we give the leaders a webinar training, a package of information. They'll have ongoing training, and everyone from their area is welcome to join a group. And they're on a listserv. They can have meetings. So we have local community outreach, and we have national groups. The national groups are each focused on a specific targeted demographic like healthcare practitioners, chefs, etc., that whole list. And so anyone who's in a local group who's doing outreach to, say, healthcare practitioners or patient advocacy groups or spiritual organizations gets linked up nationally with everyone else doing the same. So that group then can help create the strategy and tactics and materials that'll make that outreach more effective. Now, we don't see this going on for years because we see a momentum of non-GMO education and knowledge that we believe will create a tipping point very soon. So if you want to be part of this historic outreach, you have to do it soon or you'll miss the boat. It's an interesting twist on what the biotech industry says to countries all over the world, saying, if you don't jump on the GMO bandwagon, you'll miss the boat. So I commissioned a cartoon of the Prime Minister of Australia being told by a biotech representative, you act now, otherwise you'll miss the GMO boat. And behind the biotech representative was the GMO boat sinking. We also have speaker training. We have speaker training both in person and by webinar. We'll be doing speaker trainings in LA in October, in the Bay Area in May, in Seattle, I forget which, whatever the Green Fest is, in Chicago in May, in Boulder, Colorado in April, and in late April in New York City and Connecticut. And we have a webinar, a 4-part webinar we'll be offering again probably in June. And these are 8-hour courses. They have homework, and it basically allows you to have confidence to give a presentation on the health risks of GMOs. But you don't need the training in order to do this. You can download a fully scripted PowerPoint at responsibletechnology.org. You can download a long version, a medium version, or a short version. You can watch me giving a PowerPoint in this video, everything you have to know about dangerous genetically modified foods, which is available free online. You could listen to an audio CD called Don't Put That in Your Mouth, which is me giving a PowerPoint presentation. It's available free online. And you could study the materials that we have at responsibletechnology.org and easily develop your own lectures. You can cut and paste, or you could divide whatever slides you want to use. You could change the wording on the slides. It's completely yours. We're a nonprofit educational organization, and we're giving this stuff away. You can download it for free. But if you'd like to have a formal training program, then we invite you to participate with the webinar or the in-person one-day workshop. Now, when I started this talk 30 minutes ago, I didn't actually know what I was going to talk about because I wanted to first get some feedback from you, but I decided I better give you our big picture first. And I wanted to show you some of the tools, because I noticed how many hands went up when I said rate yourself from 1 to 100, how active you want to be in doing outreach on this issue. And many hands went up closer to 100. So I wanted to make sure you understood what we're doing. And then I'm about to give you an opportunity for you to ask questions, but also we're going to do a little bit of organization here before we finish. Because some of you are local to this area, and you may want to start a non-GMO action group immediately. Now, if this were only people from this local area, then this meeting would be a little different. I might have you all in a circle. It's a kind of a big group to have a circle. But we teach people, as part of their training program, how to facilitate what we call activist circles, where after you give a lecture, you say, okay, who wants to form a non-GMO action group? Come and meet me up on the stage, or maybe in this corner of the room. And we have a very specific technology of 3 specific rounds, questions to ask, ways to figure things out very quickly, so that in 25 or 30 minutes, you have an actual working group where you know when you're meeting next, where you're meeting, how often you're meeting, who's there in the room, what kind of associations and resources they have, what kind of ideas they have, and what they're planning to do between now and the next meeting. So we teach you how to facilitate those activist circles. And those are available also as part of a webinar. And we also have guides for that. Now, just to finish up with our materials before we start with the questions and the organizing, I want to share with you the other the strategies for how and why we've created these materials. This is called Hidden Dangers in Kids' Meals. This is specifically designed for the demographic group of parents. And it was part of our GM-free school campaign, which we have a 35-page manual and a whole way that you could approach the public schools or charter schools or private schools or whatnot to encourage them to change their diets for their kids. And on here is a 15-minute film from Appleton, Wisconsin, where a high school changed their diet to non-processed natural foods, and the behaviors of the kids changed overnight. It's very inspiring. It's 28 and a half minutes. You're welcome to, it's also available free online. You're welcome to play it in local access television. And that's why it's 28 and a half minutes, because that's the slot. But it's also the size that you can give a presentation at a PTA and then have enough time afterwards for a discussion. This is called The World According to Monsanto. How many people have seen it? It's very powerful. It describes a corporation that's continuously, regularly voted the most evil on the planet every year, year after year. And it makes you want to break something at the end of watching it. But it doesn't give you any direction. It doesn't give you the tipping point. It doesn't give you anything. So we put a 3-minute video called What We Could Do as part of the bonus material. And we have a showing guide, so you can actually sponsor showings at home or in public places, and then lead a discussion afterwards and end up with a group of volunteers that can plug into our Tipping Point network. We also have an 18.5-minute video called Your Milk on Drugs, Just Say No. Again, you could play it on television, and you could show it to parent groups. And there's an audio CD in here called Don't Put That in Your Mouth. Whenever you use the audio CD, if you give it to someone, you suggest listen to it in your car. Then it'll get listened to. If they put it by their computer, they may never actually get to it. So this is a very powerful activist package. It's got 3 DVDs and a CD. It's got a shopping guide and a health risk brochure inside. And it's very powerful. The 30 minutes after watching the Monsanto film are usually the most receptive a group has ever been and will ever be about doing something to get active on the GMO issue. So that's the time to gather support and commitment. So I'm going to take a few minutes. Where's the handheld mic? Okay. I'm going to take a few minutes and answer some questions very briefly, because I know some of you had some questions since the early morning talk. And then I want to get a show of hands. We'll do some local organization and see about getting you involved. And if there's any questions you have specifically about how you and your category might participate in the Tipping Point Network, if you have a health food store, if you're a healthcare practitioner, if you're part of a spiritual or religious organization, if you work on campus, if you're the parents of children that go to school, if you have a question categorically how you might get involved, I'm happy to answer that as well. So if you have a question, raise your hand and he will give you the microphone. Either I'm doing a great job or you haven't been able to hear me.
Here we have one.
Okay.
My name is Ramona Lee. I came from Oregon. I belong to group as American Dietetic Association, registered dietitian, and also belong to Seventh-day Adventist Church in Roseburg. And last September, we had a health expo from church. And my topic was food safety. And then in that food safety, I added GMO, what it does. Most of the people did not know what GM food is, nothing. So I added some brochure, came down from computer and distributed that. and I could still do the same thing more. And we have TV program out of Grants Pass, Seventh-day Adventist Church, and that TV program, TV station actually, and we can add this GMO program into that TV station that shows almost Southern Oregon covers. And another TV station in north of Oregon, which is Portland area. And if we give this program into that TV station, it will cover whole Oregon.
So what you're describing actually is an excellent example of how easy it is for one person to make a big difference. You see, and we try our best to package information so that no one has to become a speaker on GMOs. You can simply pass a DVD, send a link, post something on your Facebook. Everyone's got networks. But here's an example of how one person gave a presentation, downloaded some information. People don't know about this, they get very excited, and now it's being played on television, or could be played on television. We get emails all the time from people who are doing this spontaneously. This is what I saw about 12 months ago. People all over the United States started doing this spontaneously and reporting to me as I traveled around, and I realized we have a powerful, vibrant movement on our hands. So this Tipping Point network about forming groups, it's actually just galvanizing and making coherent a movement that's already on fire and has been propelled even more so because of the approval of alfalfa by the USDA recently, which has caused a lot of problems, a lot of aggravation and upset around the country. Another question or comment? I want to ask you a question. How many people live within 20 miles of here? Raise your hand. Okay. Now, keep your hands up. Of those of you who live within 20 miles, keep your hands up if you would like to be part of a local non-GMO action group. Okay? All right. So here's what we're going to do. Thank you. We're going to have, there's a 10-minute section after I finish talking before the plenary starts. So it's good for people in the similar geographic regions to submit their names and emails and phone numbers. And so anyone who wants to be in a local non-GMO action group will have a sign-up sheet right at this table here between the two video cameras. Put your name, email address, and phone number. And if you want to be a leader, which is a key piece, because if we don't have a leader, we're really not going to start a group, because we don't want to get everyone excited and everyone sits around kicking the dust and waiting for someone to lead, and nothing happens, and then we can't bring the group together again later on. So if you're interested in being a leader where you'll get some training, write down leader next to your name. You'll be contacted by a member of our staff, given some training, some orientation, and then the group will be placed on a listserv so you can send out an invitation saying, here's the plan, let's meet if you want, let's converse via listserv. So within 20 miles is right over at this table. Is there anyone else that wants to create a non-GMO action group in their area and has a suspicion that there might be other people from that area? Anyone else? Yes, what area? Orange County. How many people here from Orange County that would like to be part of a non-GMO action group? Okay, so you're alone here, but you're not alone in terms of our network. So what you do is you go to the website, you go to the Tipping Point Network sign-up page, and put that indicate your interests, and you'll be linked with others from Orange County who've already signed up, and indicate if you want to be a leader, because that might start the process there. Any others from a particular geographic region? All right, the next question is this. How many people here are healthcare practitioners? Raise your hand. Okay, there's a lot of you. So I'm going to speak generically about things that you can do. There's an allergist in Ohio, John Boyles, who says that I used to test for soy allergies all the time, but now that soy is genetically engineered, it's so dangerous I tell people never to eat it unless it's organic. He buys 1,000 or so audio CDs $500 at a time from us, $1 each, and sells them to his patients for $1. I think he has a non-GMO education center now in his practice. They give away the shopping guide and a health risk brochure to every patient. Many people do. Some people do the DVD as well. Some practitioners have video capacity in their waiting rooms, so they can play videos continuously. But also, healthcare practitioners are part of various associations. And associations have websites, and they have newsletters, and they have conferences, and they have policy boards. So if you're interested in doing outreach, first of all, we have the formation of a national group of healthcare professionals, again, to Non-GMO Action Group. So please go to the website, sign up, indicate that you'd like to work in that area if you would, and you'll be hooked up with others. But you can also go to your local or national organization and say, would you like to hear a speaker on GMOs? Would you like free expert information to put in your newsletter or website? Would you be interested in possibly looking at creating a policy on GMOs that's typically done after the presentation for the national conference? Can anyone think of another, for the healthcare practitioners, whether you are one or not, does anyone have another suggestion for how they might participate in outreach and education?
We do have two questions over here now, over on your far left.
Okay. Go ahead.
Can you elaborate more on the evidence against the idea that we need GM foods in order to feed the world?
Okay, I'll do that. Take the next question as well.
Can you speak to the issue a little bit more specifically in terms of when we go to the market, how we can specifically identify foods that have GMOs in them? For example, if we have corn on the cob, do we presume that's GMO, or are these things grown intended only for animal consumption?
I will answer that question first. I've received that question 3 times today about corn on the cob specifically. Popcorn is not GMO. Let's give a hand. It does not even cross-pollinate with field corn, so it doesn't have any percentage of GMOs. Corn on the cob, a smaller percentage of the corn on the cob is genetically engineered than the field corn, which is used for animal feed and corn derivatives. 8 years ago, a Cornell University website estimated 3 to 5%. I have no idea what it is today. We don't have the money to put a researcher on it to find out. No one is actually giving us the information, but it's a smaller percentage than the 86% of all the corn grown in the US. If you go to a farm stand or to a produce section and there's corn on the cob, unless you know the source of it, unless it says organic, you don't know if it's GMO or not. So it's a gamble. And the way corn pollinates, every kernel is pollinated individually, so you may have a particular kernel that's GM and another kernel that's not. When you pick up a product at the store, if it's listed on the shopping guide, that's pretty easy. But if it's not listed in the shopping guide, you can go to the inside back cover and look at the potential at-risk ingredients, like dextrose and maltodextrin and maltose, etc. Not all of these ingredients are always derived by GMOs, but sometimes they are. And then you could buy products that are organic. So that's generally the answer. If you go to the produce section, you only have corn, zucchini, yellow crookneck squash, and Hawaiian papaya to worry about. Now the bigger question is about feeding the world. I'm glad you asked that. There was the most comprehensive study on Earth about feeding the world. It was called the ISTAD report. It came out a couple of years ago. It was sponsored by more than 60 countries, plus the UN and the WTO and the WHO and UNICEF and FAO and all that, World Bank, IMF. It was put together by over 400 scientists. And their conclusion was that the current generation of GMOs has nothing to offer in meeting their goals for feeding the world eradicating poverty, or creating sustainable agriculture. Nothing at this point. Another study, the most comprehensive study of yield of crops that have been GMOs versus non-GMOs. It was put out by the Union of Concerned Scientists, and it's called Failure to Yield. It says basically that in spite of the myth that GMOs will increase yield, they don't. On average, they reduce yield. There's a tiny percentage of increase in certain corn varieties, but it's dwarfed by the increase that comes from natural selection. Most GM crops reduce yield, soybeans by 5 to 10%, canola by 7.5%, etc. If we're going to talk about feeding the world, however, the experts agree that yield is not the answer. The colleague, my friend here who spoke about having 8 billion people on Earth in a couple of decades, well, we right now produce enough food in the Earth to feed 11.3 billion people. A lot of it is lost because of waste, and a lot of it is not available to those that can't afford it. There is no magic bullet about increased yield means that 1 billion people won't go to bed malnourished or hungry tomorrow. It's a much bigger picture, and that's not handled by yield. But if yield was the answer, there was a study with over 12 million farms on over 50 countries that found that sustainable non-GMO agriculture increased yield by 79%. And studies subsequent to that showed a 100% increase in organic agriculture in developing countries. In the US, the Rodale Institute has had organic soy and corn next to GM soy and corn, and there's no substantial difference in yield, except the organic actually has 30% less inputs from petrochemicals and yields more in times of inclement weather because the crops are stronger. On top of that, GMOs are not safe. They cost a bunch of money, and they take money away from the more appropriate systems. So for many reasons, GMOs are not really designed to feed the world, and they're not successful at it. But it has been the enduring public relations spin that we hear over and over again. Golden rice is rice that's genetically engineered with vitamin A. It was on the cover of Time magazine. It could save and prevent blindness in 500,000 kids a year. Well, actually, there's a red rice that's natural, not genetically engineered, that has more vitamin A. But it's not genetically engineered, so it doesn't get the support. The golden rice has all sorts of potential side effects that could be dangerous. It produces beta-carotene, which requires other nutrients in the body to convert to vitamin A, which might not be involved in the diets of these people who are malnourished. And you could prevent blindness for $0.05 a year. 2 supplements given 6 months apart. So at a cost of $25,000, you can eliminate the blindness if you can distribute these pills. And I'm told that the golden rice costs $100 million to develop, and it's still not ready, and only produces so little vitamin A that a child of 3 has to eat like 7 pounds of it a day in order to get the daily requirement. So that's also a poster child which doesn't quite fit with reality. We have any more questions or comments regarding activism?
We do have a couple.
Yes.
Good afternoon. I know we talked a little bit earlier about backyard gardening and seeds and what do we need to worry about and what do we not. But if we have a seed packet that indicates it's an heirloom variety, is that old enough to not cause us worry?
If it is in the category of corn, zucchini, crookneck squash, I would just check with the seed producer to verify that they take measures to prevent contamination and hopefully that they test, especially in the area of corn. But other products, tomatoes, etc., there's no GM tomatoes on the market. There's no other GM produce on the market for food. There's the possibility of contamination into Swiss chard from the sugar beets at the time that they're grown at seed, but that's, the chances of contamination are small, but still there. And it's not necessarily something that I would worry about.
And our last question.
Yes.
Hi, I'm a student here at Loma Linda University. I was wondering, how can we tell if a product doesn't have GMO when there's no labeling? And I remember hearing on the news recently that some of the products that are labeled organic are actually genetically modified, but they're not using any fertilizers or anything. And also, I just wanted you to comment on what some of the dangers of genetically modified crops are.
All right. The question about dangers is a big one. I just happen to have a book here. We covered that pretty substantially this morning, and so I think I'll have to pass on that. But I'll say that the American Academy of Environmental Medicine says that GMOs are linked to through animal feeding studies to reproductive problems, accelerated aging, immune system problems, gastrointestinal problems, organ damage, and dysfunctional regulation of cholesterol and insulin. And we have seen very serious problems in animals fed GMOs, both in laboratory settings and in some cases in farm settings, and also significant changes in animals that have been fed GM and switched to non-GM. There's marked improvement. As far as avoiding GMOs, if you look at the shopping guide, there's 4 tips. The first tip is to buy organic. The organic standards do not allow a product to intentionally use GMOs. The second is to look for non-GMO project labels, non-GMO labels or seals, particularly the non-GMO project verified seal, which is a third-party verification system that requires labeling. I'll show you what that looks like. There it is. Oops. The third is to buy products that avoid the at-risk ingredients, which I mentioned earlier. The at-risk ingredients are on the inside back cover. And the fourth is to buy products listed in the guide. And inside the guide, there's some more details. So that would be the answer to that question, which is the most popular question that we get. So I want to end by saying this. I'm not against genetic engineering technology per se. The technology may be very effective, for example, at fixing a defective gene in a human, or in producing new medicines if done carefully. But at this point, it's not responsible to feed the products of this infant science to the whole population, or release these products into the environment where they can never be recalled. I do agree with the speaker that came after me. We need more science. But to me, that science needs to be done in laboratories and not in society where we are the unwilling guinea pigs in an uncontrolled experiment. Maybe someday they can safely and predictably manipulate the DNA for the betterment of health and environment. Maybe someday. But that is not today. Experts the world over agree. Not completely agree, not with the biotech industry, but they agree that this technology was rushed onto the market long before the science was ready, and certainly long before the testing was in place. And now we may be paying the consequences of that. We can whine to the government and say, can you please help us and bail us out? But I would like to suggest that this is a time for us to take personal responsibility for what's in our mouths, what's in our families' mouths, what's in our kitchen. And by doing so, we accumulate together enough non-GMO eaters to create a tipping point. And just for our own eating healthier, we end up being part of a historic, monumental reclamation of a healthier, non-GMO food supply. So I invite you to join me in this endeavor, and we can celebrate the next time we meet at the accomplishment of the tipping point and the return to genetically appropriate and natural foods. Thank you very much.